What actor, actress was completely 100% wrong for the role? I audibly laughed in the theater when Rubber Baby came around. No wonder he went back to war. Edit: for those that haven't seen the movie, it was most likely the worst time to start laughing. It's a pivotal part of the movie, but I couldn't take it. It was a terrible Rubber Baby and a terrible job acting like it was real. Edit number 2. I remember reading at the time that the actual baby actors they hired for the scene were delayed in traffic or sick or couldn't make the set. They waited for replacements, but were losing light and time and decided to just fill it in. They were supposed to hide the baby more, but they didn't reframe how the shot was going to take place, so the Rubber Baby was in full shot with its full body. It's a director's mistake, and yet everybody just keeps saying how good Clint Eastwood is at directing. The Outer Banks show is hilarious to me. They're supposed to be like high school seniors or maybe even juniors, and they at least 26 plus. But what's even weirder is that multiple times throughout the show they just casually buy alcohol, no questions asked. They just have cases of beer and whatnot. Like, do WTF, make up your mind. How old are these characters? That was not only the issue with this movie, the dialogue and the script itself were horrible. I don't think the actor was obviously the issue. They just stuck with the tell-don't-show method of storytelling, which is always horrible. I'm a criminal mastermind when the character was shown to be neither. Not to mention the entire plot of the books was to show his redemption arc, which is now impossible, so even if it didn't flop they can't continue the series. What a waste. I'd like to think that he was actually fine for the role, but just forced to play a part which had been watered down from the book character, in a plot which was weak, with motivations that were awful, alongside a host of other hackneyed characters. A decade from now I'm hoping there will be an interview with Ferdy and Shaw and Not So Entity where they say we both knew it was bad. I mean, it was terrible, right? And we asked Kenneth Branagh why it wasn't like the books, and he told us that if we wanted Disney to pay us, we should just shut up and read the words in front of us. Cameron Diaz as Miss Hannigan in Annie 2014. It was just like watching Bad Teacher. Also the same for My Sister's Keeper. I just felt she didn't have the ability to switch back and forth between trying to be a loving mother whilst also dealing with the consequences it's having on her relationship with her family. She'd either go straight from loving mother to angry at a jump. There was no in-between conflict. I'm not blaming the actress, by the way. I blame the directors for either picking the wrong person or not giving enough direction. From a physique standpoint I agree. He doesn't quite capture the himbo vibe that MCU Thor is known for. But I feel like from an acting standpoint, maybe. Tom Hiddleston is a pretty talented actor, and his work has shown that he has excellent range. I feel like if he had been cast, it would have probably be pretty good. With that said, though, I'm totally glad he didn't get the role and he got the role for Loki instead. I honestly can't imagine another person playing Loki. Ruby Rose as Batwoman. I'm all for a Batwoman show, but the protagonist needs to be believable as someone who dresses up in a costume and physically fights criminals with her bare hands. There are plenty of Gina Carano types out there who you can buy as tough fighters, but Ruby has a neck like a baby swan and looks like a stiff breeze would knock her over. Dane DeHaan and Cara Delevingne in Valerian. From today's point of view, with an abundance of lived-in sci-fi visuals in movies and video games, it's hard to explain how big a deal the comic books were for me as a child in the 1970s. Granted, the books were not consistently great, a bit of hit and miss, but in the right hands, the Valerian movie could have been the start of a movie franchise. When I sat in the movie theater, within the first minutes, I thought to myself, what the F is that? Why are these two people in the movie? That was a sad day. They felt more like siblings in a Luke and Leia knew they were siblings yet they decided to kiss anyway scenario. If there was an alternate ending, even their names sound like they're related somehow, like their parents divorced, but it was so bad that they even changed their kids' names to their new spouse's last name. Did not even remotely resemble Kovacs, whatsoever. Admittedly, Joel played that role quite perfectly, which set the bar pretty high, but even then, Anthony Mackie's behavior is entirely unlike Kovacs. TBH, I prefer to think that Altered Carbon finished with Season 1 rather than to think that they made an unwatchable Season 2. Not because it was bad but because it seems like you're watching something else, and the relationship established with Kovacs is just gone. From the way he talks, to his facial expressions, all the way down to the way he fights even. Helen Mirren in Catherine the Great on HBO. At least for the first few episodes. She's a brilliant actress, would be perfect for the aging empress, but they had the show start at the beginning of Catherine's reign. They had a 74-year-old playing a 33-year-old. Oh, and Jason Clarke, 50, was playing 22-year-old Gregory Potemkin. Anne Hathaway in the remake of Witches. Granted, it's not like that movie remake had much going for it compared to the original, but I couldn't get past the first witch convention scene in the meeting room of the hotel. The inconsistent, overdone accent paired with cringy overacting was so hard to ignore. Maybe it's just a little kids movie. I will definitely stick with the creative, and sometimes horrifying, original 90s release. At the time it was announced he would be Joker, it was met with intrigue. He was good in some movies and this role could be his true breakout performance. Everything went wrong after that, in my opinion. The look they went for with that version of Joker was terrible. The tattoos, the rich gangster clothes, the metal teeth, blah. Then there's just the fact Leto showed he simply didn't have the chops to pull it off. The delivery of the dialogue, the laugh, it all just came off as a poor imitation of the Joker rather than an actor actually playing him seriously. Edit. I should mention I also wasn't a fan of his brief scene in ZSJL, either. It showed that Joker is a role that only suits Leto on a cosmetic level. He has a ceiling as an actor, and as a frontman for a band, but that's a different discussion. And he reached it before Suicide Squad. It doesn't help that the bar for that role is so high. No matter who plays Joker next, you're being compared to the likes of Nicholson, Ledger and Phoenix. Emilia Clarke for Sarah Connor in Terminator Genesis. I just watched the movie on TV the other day, and I've noticed the movie was made during the Game of Thrones days. So, did they cast her because of GOT? She is believable as the badass leader in GOT. But in Terminator, it was like watching a 14-year-old kid playing an adult. I honestly don't see him as anything but himself in every movie he plays. I'm Will Smith in Bel-Air. I'm Will Smith and I grant wishes. I'm Will Smith and I can help you win your soulmate. I'm Will Smith and I fight aliens. I'm Will Smith and I fight robots. I'm Will Smith and I fight my clone. I'm Will Smith and I fight aliens again, but I don't come back for the sequel. I'm Will Smith and I'm Will Smith but with superpowers. I'm sure he has range, but he never ventures out of his own box to explore his own talent. Edit. Much like Will Ferrell, he does have some movie that shows that he has the skills of a professional actor, Stranger Than Fiction and In Pursuit of Happiness, respectively. But then he pretty much typecasts himself in all of his other films. You still see some of it in I Am Legend, more towards the end of the film during the climax. Theatrical ending only. Director's cut has better acting. It's when he has the big roles or roles that are very known in pop culture where he acts the same. That movie could have been excellent if they had picked one movie, but it felt like they made two different movies and then smashed them together. I also found the ending ridiculous. The person who now knows that humans are a galaxy-spanning advanced species with insanely advanced tech that is functionally magic and also she literally owns the Earth is suddenly happy cleaning toilets. I actually don't think he was bad. They were obviously going for a Harvey Weinstein-esque slimy powerful pervert villain and I think he nailed the slimy creepiness. He definitely had the right look, demeanor, and body language to sell the part. Although I think he could have been more physically imposing, but that's not really what they were going for. It was really unclear what accent he was attempting, so I agree with you there. But I didn't think it was distractingly bad. Honestly, I think that was way more of a directing, production issue. While I agree another actress could have suited the role and played it way better, the massive over-editing and processing of all the music in that movie was what hurt it the most. If you compare it to something like Mamma Mia, a fucking weird comparison, I know, where so many of the main cast weren't fantastic singers, Broadway-style performers, but because the singing was, as much as possible, done on set, in the scene. Sure, it didn't come out perfect, but it made for a damn good, really enjoyable musical, in my opinion. She was so, unfortunately, a token character that she stood out like a sore thumb. Also, Carrie affording a massive apartment and a closet full of shoes, not the most believable on what would have been her salary, and her not being a trust fund baby. Okay, fine, I'll let it go. Her affording an assistant, to do what? I have no idea. Hell no. Quentin Tarantino in pretty much anything. Stay behind the camera please. Ashton Kutcher in Jobs. He might do comedy, he might do action, but he can't do intellectual. It didn't work when he took over 2.5 Men as an IT genius, and it doesn't work here. Scarlett Johansson for Ghost in the Shell. She was cast for a pure star power ... but at an incredible disservice to the character. And finally, J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson ... Nah, just fucking with you, dude was goddamn perfect. There's a movie with Christian Bale called Exodus, Gods and Kings. I remember trying to watch it years ago and I couldn't get into it at all because I felt like his British accent was so forced and fake. Like I was legitimately upset at how bad it sounded. It completely took me out of the film. Later I realized the dude is actually fucking British. He was probably just talking normal. I should try watching that again. Maybe I was high or something. While I'd love to see him in multiple movies, I don't know if he would have signed on for it. That's the MCU's MO. Cast a balance of relative unknowns and established but not blockbuster celebrity superstar actors in main, recurring roles, and then cast household names, highly acclaimed actors as villains or one-off characters that only have to be around for a movie or two so they can give 100% without feeling tied down. RDJ in Iron Man was a huge gamble since at that time everyone just thought of him as a junkie. Burnout vs. Jeff Goldblum edit. Bridges as the villain. Although damn would I love to have seen Jeff Goldblum as Obadiah Stane. Chris Evans, already an established actor, but certainly not a household name, versus Hugo Weaving in Captain America. Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston in Thor, both relative unknowns at the time of the first movie versus Christopher Eccleston in Thor, The Dark World and Jeff Goldblum, Kate Blanchett in Ragnarok. Chris Pratt, known for Parks and Recreation but not exactly a Hollywood superstar, and certainly not an action hero, and Dave Bautista versus Glenn Close, Kurt Russell. The fact that the MCU often catapults their unknowns, relatively successful actors to superstardom is because they're given really good scripts, direction, and the movies make a ton of money, but also because Sarah Finn has an unbelievable eye for potential in actors and a deep understanding of how they can fit comic characters while bringing something new to the role. She deserves nearly as much credit as Kevin Feige does for the MCU's success, in my opinion. Katherine Heigl in One for the Money. It was a highly anticipated movie for fans of the Janet Ivanovich book series and she just didn't have what the character needed. And then she bought the rights to the whole franchise and won a tank in theaters because of her performance. She all but ensured none of the other movies would come to fruition. It was intentional character assassination by the movie screenwriter Steve Kloves, who was an open Emma Watson fan and actively pushed for a Harry, Hermione outcome. He cut all Best Book Ginny moments and bashed Ron Weasley on multiple occasions. For example in Poe, Snape ridiculed Hermione for being know-it-all. Movie Ron agreed with Snape, while book Ron vigorously defended Hermione. Agree and disagree. Bonnie Wright is beautiful, but whoever styled her as Ginny did her dirty. Ginny Weasley is supposed to be one of the hottest, most popular girls in school by the time of Half-Blood Prince when Harry starts crushing on her. Instead, they made her look plain and put her in boring clothes. Instead of showing how funny she was and how she and Harry grew close over their shared sense of humor and love of Quidditch, they directed them to sit awkwardly with each other and her to tie his shoelaces. That was direction and not Bonnie Wright's fault. I agree that she and Daniel Radcliffe didn't have much chemistry, but considering the poor direction noted above, I don't know how much of that was their fault. Someone didn't want right overshadowing Emma Watson, and it shows in their hair, makeup, clothing, everything, and I think that extends to how the kissing scenes were done. Can't have Bonnie Wright showing chemistry with Ratcliffe, but we do get that weird Harry, Hermione making out vision from the Horcrux and the sweet little dance they had. Decisions were made, and I don't think it was Bonnie Wright's fault. Stephen Graham is a great actor, fantastic in pretty much everything that he does, but he had a role in a TV true crime drama called White House Farm, currently on Netflix. He plays a Welsh character, but unfortunately he really cannot do a Welsh accent. It was so bad it was laughable, a real distraction throughout the whole series. I am actually mates with his cousin but not met Stephen in person. If I do, I probably won't mention it. Another famous case is Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. Audrey practiced so hard and really tried to get to sing her own part, but they gave the singing bits to Marni Nixon, of West Side Story fame. Hell, Singing in the Rain is a whole musical about voice replacement. There used to be a lot more replacement voices if the actor wasn't up to snuff, but nowadays we just push through anyway. He's also supposed to be Ukrainian, not Spanish. Also, as a follow-up, Stuart Townsend as Lestat in Queen of the Damned. Now, that movie is my personal guilty pleasure, mostly due to the awesome soundtrack composed by Jonathan Davis of Cohen and performed by other great singers. That said, I've read the books and know how much was changed. Leonardo DiCaprio in Gangs of New York. The character was supposed to be a particular historical type. An Irish boy drafted into the army, then worked as a mercenary, then came back to New York to avenge his father. The thing was, he just looked callow and out of place in the role. He still had that boyishness. The funny thing is, he didn't look or feel the part on screen in 2002, but just 4 years later in 2006 when he was in The Departed, he would have been perfect because he got down that rangy, hard, vicious character that he should have been in Gangs, and he carried that through to The Revenant. Tom Cruise for Jack Reacher. From A Wanted Man, he was one of the largest men she had ever seen outside the NFL. He was extremely tall, and extremely broad, and long-armed, and long-legged. The lawn chair was regular size, but it looked tiny under him. It was bent and crushed out of shape. His knuckles were nearly touching the ground. His neck was thick and his hands were the size of dinner plates. A wild man, but not really. Underneath everything else seemed strangely civilized. His gaze was both wise and appealing, both friendly and bleak, both frank and utterly cynical. Reacher is described as being 6 feet 5 inches, 1.96 meters, tall, weighing 210 to 250 pounds, 95 to 113 kilograms, and having a 50-inch, 130 centimeters, chest. In Never Go Back, he is described as having a six-pack like a cobbled city street, a chest like a suit of NFL armor, biceps like basketballs, and subcutaneous fat like a Kleenex tissue. Tom is so tiny. He is physically fit, but he is not a tank. It's just so typical of Hollywood to choose someone that cannot even measure up to the original. I do not understand why everyone hates on Kristen Stewart for these movies. Yes, they were awful. However, she played the part exactly as written. The character of Bella Swan is devoid of all personality. She is an empty shell that was written so teenage girls could insert themselves into the book and pretend they were the main character. Kristen Stewart played this part exactly as it was written. Leaden, dull, and absolutely devoid of any personality. I think it is a shame that Kristen Stewart is blamed for how bad this movie is when everything about the movie is bad. No actor could have made this role any better. Frown. Jennifer Lawrence was the wrong choice for Katniss Everdeen. I believe she did the best she could, but she just wasn't the right choice. You knew Katniss was a kid. 16 is still young. She was kind, determined, sometimes shy, and industrious. She cared deeply about her family more than she ever did herself, and she had some insecurities toward her relationships with the boys. The romance with Peeta started out as strategy, a means to survival, and gradually blossom into true feelings. The whole endeavor of her world being manipulated is traumatic, to the point where she develops a dependency on morphine to numb the pain as she recovers in District 13. I feel like Lawrence is too stoic, too serious, too expressionless. She doesn't capture Katniss's full range of emotions: fear, joy, self-doubt, love, pride, etc. I will say, I did enjoy Lawrence in Red Sparrow. I feel like her lack of expression worked well for that role.